2017 Year in Review, February. A number of people thought that January 2017 looked pretty bad. Donald Trump was sworn in as President of the United States. Liberals went crazy. They couldn't believe that the U.S. had elected a president who had such a totally different political outlook from their own. How could this have happened, they asked themselves. They decided that they had to fight back. They engaged in political protests and in hyperbolic criticism of the new president. Conservatives countered by moaning that everyone was treating the president unfairly. They said that, unlike Barack Obama, God had put President Trump into power. They said that the new president was a good man, and that he was an honest businessman, and that, anyway, he is a much better person than his evil alter ego, the most evil person who ever walked the earth, that horrible spawn of the devil who is Hillary Clinton. Then came February.
Oil continued to be relatively cheap, about $50 per barrel. Skyscrapers in Dubai illuminated the desert night. Morning dawned on Shanghai, China. In Lima, Peru, it was summertime, and the coastal waters were warm. Europe was more prosperous than it had been in more than a decade. Burj Khalifa in Dubai was the tallest building in the world. Oil continued to empower international trade and travel. Trade brought renewed prosperity to world economies. The U.S. Senate confirmed Rex Tillerson as United States Secretary of State. He is shown here testifying before the Senate at a later date. Israel announced plans to build a new settlement in the West Bank. Presumably speaking on behalf of U.S. President Trump, National Security Advisor Michael Flynn announced, "As of today, we are officially putting Iran on notice." United States federal judge James Robart temporarily blocked Trump's so-called travel ban. President Trump, in a phone call with Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko, discussed strengthening U.S. ties with Ukraine. This is something that Angela Merkel would likely have approved of, but that Vladimir Putin would not have liked. Queen Elizabeth II marked her 65th anniversary as the British monarch. U.S. President Donald Trump spoke with Chinese President Xi Jinping and announced his intention to continue the One China policy. Presumably, this was to leverage China to put pressure on North Korea. In a January phone call with Trump, Vladimir Putin of Russia suggested extending the 2010 New START Treaty, which is scheduled to expire in 2021. But President Trump rejected the proposal. The United States under Obama made its nuclear weapons smarter, more accurate, and more lethal, but kept the total number of strategic weapons within the START Treaty's limits. Russia had engaged in a similar modernization of its strategic nuclear arsenal. Trump has stated that he intends to further modernize and expand U.S. nuclear capabilities. The U.S. Senate confirmed Representative Tom Price to be Secretary of Health and Human Services. Later, September 29th, Price would resign for taking charter flights at taxpayer expense. North Korea tested a ballistic missile over the Sea of Japan. Over the next 10 months of 2017, the country would fire 23 missiles during 16 tests, with the launch on November 29th demonstrating the capacity to reach more than 5,500 kilometers. By December of 2017, Kim Jong-un's ultimate goal of arming his country with nuclear weapons that could reach the U.S. mainland increasingly looked achievable. Donald Trump, the U.S. president who has tweeted more than any other, responded with tweets calling Kim Jong-un Rocket Man and saying that he is short and fat. Not to be outdone, Kim Jong-un referred to Trump as a mentally deranged dotard. By the end of the year, it looked like sanctions were clearly not working against North Korea. Increasingly, the Korean-U.S. conflict looked like a man-made catastrophe of proportions never before seen by humanity. World War II resulted in a death toll of 80 million people, including civilians and deaths from war-related disease and famine. It looked like a new Korean War could potentially be worse. Michael T. Flynn resigned as National Security Advisor in the Trump administration. The White House said that Flynn was fired for lying to Vice President Mike Pence concerning foreign contacts. Later, in December 2017, Trump tweeted that another reason that he fired Flynn was that Flynn had lied to the FBI. 3 European women walked together with bare legs in a photography studio. They sported black panties, and each had different body types. Scott Pruitt was confirmed by the U.S. Senate to be the administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency. Over ensuing months, he would cut jobs at the EPA and would roll back regulations designed to protect the environment. Scott Pruitt's critics called him a climate change denier. Nevertheless, on November 3rd, 13 federal agencies added to the newest volume of the National Climate Assessment, which concludes that climate change is man-made and that it is driving extreme weather events, rises in sea level, the disappearance of Arctic sea ice, and the general warming of the oceans. One might speculate that the faceless scientists who undertook the analysis of the data that produced the report may eventually all be fired from their jobs at the federal government. The monument of the 3 human races was displayed in Goiânia, Brazil. The U.S. Justice Department put forward plans to expand the use of private prisons. Refugees were everywhere, because war was everywhere. All around the world, people were voting with their feet, looking for better lives for themselves and their families. People of the world were fleeing oppression. Wars were everywhere. The war in Afghanistan continued. The war in Iraq still did not end. From the civil war in Syria, refugees were fleeing by the thousands. The civil war in Yemen involved world actors like Saudi Arabia, Russia, Iran, and the USA. India and Pakistan were still in conflict over Kashmir. Tens of thousands of anti-Putin protesters in Moscow, Russia, commemorated opposition leader Boris Nemtsov, who was assassinated on this bridge 2 years earlier. Liberals in the USA started going crazy.
It's the end of the world,
they said.
The coastline will be flooded due to global warming.
The American tradition as a land of freedom will be made a mockery.
Greedy corporate interests will eat our planet alive.
It's going to be awful.
It might even end in nuclear war.
Americans are going to hate Americans like never before.
And there won't be any more gun-free zones.
You won't be able to trust the ingredient labels on the side of cereal boxes.
Really?
Asked other liberals.
Yes, it's true. The FDA, USDA, and EPA will be made dysfunctional. Nobody will import American food. Without illegal immigrants working our meatpacking plants, without reliable food safety certification, with foreign countries no longer buying American, with American citizens eating poisonous food and breathing poisonous air, the forthcoming nuclear holocaust will be embraced as a cathartic relief to the toxicity of our own planet.
An American man in a tinfoil hat watched the show he had recorded. He was amazed to see Australian protesters in support of churches offering sanctuary to refugees.
Churches in America don't support refugees,
He thought.
Religious people in America only support the rich and privileged.
The man in the tinfoil hat believed that the words, "In God we trust," which appear on American currency, were words of blasphemy, a form of taking God's name in vain. He believed that God would destroy America for its blasphemy. Then it became March.